Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Madera City Council. Today is Wednesday, December 16th. It is 6 p.m. This meeting will be conducted pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order, which suspend certain requirements of the Ralph M. Brown Act. The City Council meeting will be live streamed on the city's website. Members of the public may participate in the meeting remotely through an electronic meeting via phone by dialing 669-900-6833, enter ID 978-7265-7853, followed by *9 on your phone to speak. Comments will also be accepted via email at citycouncilpubliccomment@madera.gov or by regular mail at 205 West 4th Street, Madera, California, 93637. We call this meeting to order. Alicia, could you please call roll call?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Garcia?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Villegas?
Here.
Councilmember Gallegos?
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Here.
Councilmember Montes?
Here.
And Councilmember Evans?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you please stand for the invocation by Reverend Sammy Neely, Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church.
That you all bow your heads at this time. Father God, we once again come before you, Father, thanking you, Father, for this opportunity to come together in the business of this great city. Father, we ask that you look upon each and every individual that's functioning tonight in the capacity of leaders for this city. Father, we ask that you bless this meeting. Bless us as we go through the end of this year, Father. We ask that you hold us together, that we stay healthy, stay strong, and stay faithful. We ask that you bless each and every member, that they have a happy holiday and a very Merry Christmas. Father, we just thank you and praise you in the name of Jesus.
First presentation will be a proclamation recognizing December as General Aviation Appreciation Month. Is Felipe Grimaldo in the house? Mr. Grimaldo was going to represent the committee at the airport. Since he's not here, I'll go ahead and read this. The proclamation, City of Madera, General Aviation Appreciation Month. Whereas the City of Madera is in the state of California has a significant interest in the continued vitality of general aviation, aircraft manufacturing, aviation educational institutions, aviation organizations, and community airports. And I'm going to go ahead and skip this, this lengthy. Now, therefore, I, Santos Garcia, Mayor of the City of Madera, do hereby proclaim general aviation a vital strategic asset to the City of Madera and declare December as General Aviation Appreciation Month in the City of Madera. Our second proclamation is Mr. Jimbo Forga. Chief, could you unmute him, please? Or I can.
Thought Watson was going to talk.
Oh, there you go. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So it's my pleasure to read this proclamation for you.
Okay.
From the City of Madera, proclamation recognizing Battalion Chief James Forga for 39 years of CAL FIRE service and service to the City of Madera Fire Department. Whereas Chief Jimbo Forga was hired in June of 1981 as a firefighter in the City of Madera Fire Department. And whereas Chief Forga has served the citizens of the City of Madera and the citizens of the state of California for 39 years. Whereas Chief Forga's loyalty and commitment as a firefighter, fire apparatus engineer, fire captain, and battalion chief were exemplary to the safety of the citizens he served loyally and statewide. Whereas on December 30th, 2020, Chief James Forga will retire after 39 years with CAL FIRE and his service as battalion chief to the city of Madera and the state of California. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Santos Garcia, Mayor of the city of Madera, do hereby proclaim the 16th day of December 2020 as a day in celebration of Battalion Chief James Forga's service to CAL FIRE and the city of Madera, and offer best wishes for a happy and long retirement. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. And thank you to the council. And also thank you to Chief Watson and Chief Van Lobensel's for the support that they've given us. And to the city manager, Arnaldo Rodriguez. I really appreciate all the support that we've gotten. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Yeah, I would just I appreciate you, Mayor, reading that proclamation. I appreciate the council and all the work from Alicia on getting that ready. And it's a very sad day to me today when they did the sign off for Chief Forga. You know, I've had the pleasure of working for him, with him. He's been one of the best partners I had when we were equals. And I even had a great privilege of supervising him for the last year. So after 39 years, it is amazing to see someone so motivated and dedicated to his job. And he's truly going to be missed. He's truly a good friend. So thank you, Chief Forga.
Thank you, Chief Watson. Couldn't have done it without you, and I really appreciate it. Also, I'd like to give a little shout out to Councilmember Gallegos for the support on the new station 58. It couldn't have made its way to where it's at today without her help. And also to former members, Donald Hawley, Derek Robinson, Will Oliver, and Charles Rigby, and also former city manager David Tooley. Each and every one of them made this day a couple Mondays ago happen a long time ago, but it's really appreciated. And Cece, thank you. Appreciate everything.
Mayor
Arnaldo?
Garcia, if I can have a few minutes just to thank Chief Forga for all that he's done. 39 years, wow. That is just amazing. And like Chief Watson said, you have worked hard from the time you started to the time that you've ended, which is amazing because you usually don't see that in a profession. When they're retiring, they're usually just doing time, but you didn't do that. So I thank you for that. I thank you for sharing your life with us. You were there day and night. Sometimes when we had a lot of issues happening and we had somebody out, you were there for longer away from your family. So that's truly appreciated. I did go in the fire station and saw pictures of Chief Forga when he was young. When he started with us, he had lots of hair, and now he doesn't have so much. So we probably took some of that hair away from you. So we apologize for that, but you will truly be missed. There will be a place in my heart that when I got on council, you were open-armed, willing to help whatever I needed, information, and to guide me where I needed to go as a new council member. So with that, I'm indebted to you, and I wish you the best. And don't forget about us here in Little Madera. You're always welcome back. And when we do that ribbon cutting for 58, you better be there. I'm going to come pick you up. So thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you, Cece. I appreciate it. I don't know if Arnaldo heard me, but I really want to give a shout out to Arnaldo and Chief Lawson over at PD, because public safety is really important in my mind. And we've gotten a lot of support for public safety from the community and from our department heads and just the administration itself. So it's huge. And I really appreciate all the department heads for working with me the last 8 years. And it's been a pleasure serving the citizens of Madera and also the council. So thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
We will go on to item number 1, actually, Department of Public Health update on COVID-19. Good evening, Sarah. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. We are, of course, still in the middle of a surge. Our case rate for Madera County as of today is 50 per 100,000 population. If you recall, to move from the purple to the red tier, the case rate needed to be 7 or below. So that's a big difference between 7 and 50. And I wanted to just highlight, and this is something that's available on our dashboard. There's a chart that's in the top right-hand corner of the dashboard that shows case rate by reporting areas. So the 2 reporting areas for the city of Madera include reporting area A, which is the west side of 99. The case rate in that area is well above 50 at 102. The case rate for area C, which is city of Madera on the east side, is also above the county case rate at 85. So case rate is, of course, number of positives per population. And it is concerning that we're seeing more cases in the city of Madera by population. So it factors in that you have a larger number of people in the city of Madera than in other areas of the county. It's a rate. So that is something that we continue to message about. We're wanting folks to understand where they can get tested, what they can do to be able to safely isolate and quarantine. And we would encourage residents to visit the 2 websites that help them do that. Valley COVID Help, HELP.com is in English, and the Spanish is ayudadevallecovid.com. Our positivity rate for the county is 15%. Again, to move into the red, the threshold is 8%. So this continues to be an ongoing issue. We are currently in a stay-at-home order. That's a regional order. So the counties that are included in that, in our region, the San Joaquin Valley region, span from as far north as Stanislaus County or Modesto, all the way down to Kern County, Bakersfield, and also include mountain counties like Calaveras and Tuolumne, and neighbors to our valley on the west side as well. San Benito is included. So in that entire area, as of noon today, there was 0 capacity in the ICUs of hospitals. That has been true. It has oscillated between 0 and below 2% for the last 4 days. On the state call that we just had prior to this, we are continuing to look at alternate strategies. Waivers are in place for ratios between nurses and patients to be altered so that nurses can take care of more patients at the same time. That, of course, taxes our resources. The limiting factor is staffing. We have the ability, more beds, more physical infrastructure that could be expanded, but we do not have enough staff to be able to staff those beds appropriately. So we're looking at creative strategies to manage in a crisis. Just to kind of project forward, if nothing changes, the models look like that by the end of January, we will more than double the number of hospitalizations that we have now. And how to manage that and be able to take care of sick people is going to be a real challenge. So that's why we are urging people to, as much as possible, stay at home. And I think the most important thing is, what can we each individually do? So if you planned on going to the store 3 times this week, can you consolidate that down into 1 trip? Can you order online instead? What are those options that take the risk from a higher risk to a lower risk? Just to give you kind of an idea of how transmission is happening, it's not surprising. It's a pretty similar trend. We have 60% of our cases that we're able to get a hold of and actually interview report having been in contact with somebody they know that they suspected had COVID. So it's person to person. And the other 40%, either we couldn't get a hold of them or they have no idea where they got it. They've been lots of places and they just don't know. So of the ones that they think they know where they got it, 59% were household contacts, 13% attended a community event, 17% had contact in a workplace setting. And so the events ranged from friend and family gatherings, about half of them were that. Some reported attending a religious service, others a large private gathering. So these are, ongoing issues that we've experienced, and it really goes along with, I think, both COVID fatigue, which we've talked about, as well as the holiday season and people's desire to be together with friends and family. And we certainly understand that desire. We're people too, and understand that people want to be together with family. I think the thing that's really been motivating for me, because I have parents who are aging as well, and I, kind of think through, well, yes, it's a real sacrifice, both for them and for me, to not be able to see them. But if that sacrifice means that we can wait out through the vaccine, and then I have them for a couple, more years instead of the short period of time that's tangible now, then that motivates me to make decisions about what I can do to protect those who are vulnerable. I did want to share, I understand and people were interested in hearing about update to our public health laboratory with regards to the ability to do COVID testing. The first thing I'd like to share is that we have expanded testing capacity through state resources significantly in the last month. And we encourage people to visit our testing page, maderacounty.com/COVID-19 testing, to be able to find a location for testing. And we are close to maxing out those resources, and the state has offered us additional staffing, and that's going to be rolling out. So we're hoping to, the drive-through sites will be 2 lanes instead of 1 lane. So we'll expand our resources in that way. Simultaneous to that, and I mentioned this probably months ago, because that's when the whole process started. We, how do I say this? Our public health laboratory is, by comparison, a very small lab. It was built proportionally to our population with some growth potential. And if you were to think about our public health lab as, they produce cars and they do they make a couple dozen cars regularly per week. They've got the fundamentals to do that, and they do it really, really well. And we have a state-of-the-art lab. Doing high volume COVID testing and the ability to do that was taking our lab that builds a couple dozen cars a week and converting it to something that builds 747s by the hundreds. So it was a big thing, not a small thing. And it was something actually that we didn't consider for the first, until the summertime. And what happened is equipment became available from the state, and they told us that they would support us in doing it because it's a big lift for the staffing, for the infrastructure and everything. So this is what we've done so far. We've had a remodel of one of our rooms to add physical space and reconstruct the space. So our brand new lab got a remodel. We have done a lot of learning about what has to go into it and the different equipment that's needed. We have purchased equipment. We also have rented equipment through a state contract, and all of that has been delivered. We also, this week, we're able to get a contract for a lab information management system that allows us to manage that high volume of data and get it back out to those who have gotten tests, and the ability to report those electronically. So we are in a process right now of calibrating and certifying the equipment. That's going to take several weeks. And we are hopeful that we will start being able to do testing about mid-January. At that time, we're expecting probably about 100 tests. Let me see, 100 tests per day. And then in the following months, we would ramp up to a maximum of about 400 per day. So again, still a lot of complicated things that need to be put in place in training. And we've worked really hard to make this happen. And part of what this will do is it will reduce the turnaround time for testing. We will be able to do higher volumes with results coming much faster. We recognize the burden of quarantine. Like many, it's businesses, and we experience this too. Like we haven't had transmission of COVID inside our office from one worker to another, but we've had workers that are exposed outside. And then when they're positive, contacts are identified in the office, and then a whole bunch of people are out on quarantine. Many of you have experienced this. It's really, really difficult, and it's a burden on businesses and agencies. And so the faster we can get test results, the faster we can actually get through this process and get people back to work and doing at least this version of normal. The last thing I just want to cover is the great news that happened this week, and I wanted to end on this high note, and that, of course, is that the vaccine was delivered to California. That happened on the 14th. That's my birthday. I considered that a birthday gift and was so excited that it happened on that day. And then the very next day, our first allocation was delivered to Valley Children's Hospital. It was delivered there because they have the ultra cold storage currently. We also have ultra cold storage that's been identified across the county, and we have 2 additional freezers that are on their way to public health. So we are going to have the ability to store and manage lots of vaccine in lots of locations and providers. It's a logistical challenge, this vaccine, both the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna, 2 doses, different storage temperatures, different time periods between the 2 doses. How do you get it out to people? Who is in phase 1 and who's in phase 2? All of those things are actively planned and rolled out real time. So we have a second round of, okay. When I talk about the numbers, I'm talking about first doses. So the second dose automatically is ordered on the back end. So we had 975 Pfizer new doses, first doses. We're going to get another 975 first doses at the end of December. We're also going to get 3,000 first doses of Moderna vaccine. So between those allocations, based on our estimates, we will be able to vaccinate all of our critical hospital staff in Madera County. And so that is great news for maintaining our infrastructure, especially as we're in the middle of this surge. Other phases will continue with healthcare workers in other areas and critical infrastructure, prioritizing first the people who have direct contact with COVID patients and individuals who are positive. So for instance, Department of Public Health, people like me, I'm not in that first phase 1 because I'm not interacting with patients, but my staff that are doing testing, those are people who are symptomatic. Those are individuals that would get vaccinated. And so that's kind of the rule of thumb when you think about, say, law enforcement or EMTs and things like that. Are those people that have direct contact with COVID? Those individuals are being vaccinated first. In terms of general population, it's an estimate because, of course, supply chain has a big impact on this, but we're looking at general population receiving vaccine probably late spring. And so we are already doing planning for how we can mobilize that effectively and make it available to our residents in Madera County in a way that's easy for them and easy for us to be able to report and track. So that's my report tonight. Any questions I could answer?
I don't see any hands raised at this time. As always, thank you very much, Sarah. We really appreciate your the information. It's always educational. Really appreciate the fact that we are getting those vaccines out to our first responders. That's awesome. And maybe we can have a challenge where the city council members, when it's their turn, we can do a video of them getting the shot.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That would be great.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your report. We will move on to, we don't have any introductions, any workshops. We will be moving on to the consent calendar. Alicia, you had an announcement regarding the consent calendar?
Yes, I jumped the gun earlier. My apologies.
No problem.
I believe it's the Grants Department is requesting to pull item B4 for further discussion.
Thank you. Let me read the matter here. Matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion and one vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, a member of the public or a member of the council may request an item be removed from the consent calendar and they will be considered separately. So I believe, Ms. Yvette, you will be discussing is it B4?
B4, yes. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I only wanted to make a clarification to a page on the safety plan for this item. Page 8 had two boxes omitting information, and I wanted to clarify that the safety plan now includes a targeted submittal date of December 21st. This is of when the plan will be submitted to Caltrans and MCTC. That is all. It does not change the staff report or the resolution.
Thank you very much for that. Do we have any, Alicia, do we have any comments on the consent calendar by the public?
We do not, Mayor.
I will ask my colleagues to, if there's any subject matter here that they want to consider changing at all.
Mr. Mayor, if there's no further discussion on the consent calendar, I'd like to move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Jose Rodriguez to approve the consent calendar, second by Councilmember Steve Montes. Alicia, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I just wanted to clarify that I wanted to approve the consent calendar with item B4 modified or corrected by Ms. Iraeta. So with that, I just wanted to make sure I clarified my motion.
Thank you very much.
And now for the roll call vote, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Villegas,
I have no comment about that.
So are you saying aye? Yes?
Aye.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilmember Montes,
Yes.
Councilmember Gallegos,
Yes.
Councilmember Evans,
Yes.
Mayor Garcia.
Yes.
That's 6 yes votes. Motion passes.
Thank you very much, Alicia. We will now skip public hearings, number C, and go on to item D, petitions, bids, resolutions, ordinances, and agreements. Item D1, Proposition 68 per capita grant funds. Recommendation, adopt a resolution approving the program applications for Proposition 68 per capita grant funds. Report by Mr. Scarborough.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Mary Church, our administrative analyst in the Parks Department, will actually be presenting this item tonight. She's done a fair amount of work on this project, as always, has worked very hard on it. So I think this is a good opportunity for her. She is the subject matter expert. So welcome her. Thank you.
Thank you, John. All right, let me share my screen here. Give me just a moment. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Mary Church. I am the Administrative Analyst in the Parks and Community Services Department. Tonight, I'm going to be giving you guys a brief presentation on the Proposition 68 program application for per capita grant funds. So the per capita grant program originates from Prop 68 and is allocated to cities and local districts based on population. It represents funding of over $198 million between two different programs, the General Per Capita Program and the Urban County Per Capita Program. The City of Madera has been allocated $177,952 in per capita funding under the General Per Capita Program. A timeline of events for this per capita grant. In October of this year, there was a mandatory grant administration workshop. This was attended by members of the Parks and Community Services Department. At this time, the State Parks Department has asked that the city adopt a resolution approving applications. The grant applications themselves are not due until December 2021, so about a year from now, and projects must be completed by December 2023. Funds under the per capita grant program are intended for local park rehabilitation, creation, and improvement. So these are capital outlay projects. Staff wishes to submit an application for the Olive Park project and utilize the per capita grant as matching funds towards the Prop 68 statewide park program grant application. Council may recall in October, we brought before you an item regarding two applications for the SPP grant, and Olive Park is one of those projects. The inclusion of these per capita funds towards this project at Olive Park would indicate a financial commitment by the city, and we believe that it will strengthen our SPP application. Some background on the Olive Park project. Olive Park is a city-owned parcel. It's approximately half of an acre, and it was recently acquired as part of the Olive Avenue street widening project. Staff has engaged in a series of 5 community planning meetings during October and November. So these meetings are a requirement of the SPP application. And essentially what we've done is we've asked people who live in these neighborhoods what kinds of things they'd like to see in a park in their neighborhood. Some of the amenities identified through these meetings, which will be included in the final park design, are open green space, a playground structure, swings, a picnic shelter with tables, a half basketball court, and a ping pong table. This is a street view of the site. It's on the southwest corner of Olive Avenue and Knox Street. It's right down the street from Sierra Vista Elementary School. Here's another photo of the site in its current condition. So you can see right in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Hopefully we'll get lots of use out of the future park. Tonight, staff recommends that City Council adopt the resolution approving the program application for Proposition 68 per capita grant funds. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
I do not see any hands raised. Is anyone of my colleagues wishing to address this issue at all? Ms. Gallegos?
This probably is not for Ms. Church. It's probably more for Keith. When we build the park, we're going to build out on that road to make it wider, correct, Keith, before we put that park into place?
I think Alan wants to say something.
Oh, then Alan, yes, okay. Where'd she go?
She just banged on my wall.
I was trying to tell you, you were muted, Keith. That's all. Take it away.
Okay, I'm not sure whether I can take it away. Kind of caught me off guard.
Sorry.
The question was about the improvements on Knox and Olive.
Oh, yeah, I apologize, yes. The road improvements will actually be widening the street and be cutting into those parcels.
Okay.
So what will happen is whatever's left over after the roadway, then the plans for the parks will have to go ahead and compensate for that. But the structures have been removed, and Undergrounding is occurring right now on the project. So yes, a simple answer is the road will be widened prior to.
Plans for the park. Perfect.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Councilmember Steve Montes.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So this is for Mary. So, and I apologize if I missed it, but so this is a non-competitive grant and the application deadline is next year. So once we apply for it, is it kind of like an automatic thing? As long as we meet the requirements, we would get the funds and we can start earlier than that deadline, or do we still have to wait for the deadline?
So we do have to wait for the deadline. We do automatically get the funds. They are allocated to us based on population. So the 177,000 is the allocation that the city has already received. So essentially at this part, it's kind of going through the formal process. By adopting the resolution tonight, it will allow staff to prepare the application for the project itself, and then we'll be able to submit that. I believe that the applications are opening sometime in 2021. I don't have an exact date for that, but the December date is when they're basically the last date that they're going to accept any application. So it's going to be kind of an ongoing period. So as soon as we get an application in and it's accepted and the grant is executed, which this resolution will allow us to execute that grant, then we'll be able to move forward with the project, and it just has to be completed by December 2023.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? If not, we will move on to, do we have any member of the public, Alicia, asking to comment on this issue?
No, Mayor, we do not.
Then I will bring it back to council for action.
I still move to approve D1 as presented.
Second.
Councilmember Gallegos, and I think it was Artemio?
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Councilmember Rodriguez, okay. Motion to approve. Alicia, could we have the roll?
Yes, and Mayor, I would like to read off the roll call votes by district. So I'll begin with District 1.
Yes.
District 2.
Yes.
District 3.
Yes.
District 4.
Yes.
District 6.
Yes.
And Mayor Garcia.
Yes. Aye.
Thank you. Final vote is 6 yes, motion passes.
Thank you.
Way to change it up, Alicia. Keep us on our toes. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to D2, Gateway Drive Central Avenue 3rd Street East Street Sidewalk Improvements Project, Federal Project Number CML 5157095, City Project Number R38. I believe D2 will be by Ellen Bitter.
That's correct. Thank you very much, Mayor. Good evening. Good evening, members of the council. Again, my name is Ellen Bitter. I'm with the engineering department, and I would like to share my screen here. Okay, can you all see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay. So given the long name and numbers following that project, that's how we identify our capital improvement projects. It's been budgeted in our CIP and the city's annual budget for fiscal year 2021. Tonight, our recommendation is to approve the award of a contract for installation of missing sidewalks in the area bounded by Gateway Drive, Central Avenue, 3rd Street, and East Street in the amount of $383,857 to the company Whitbro Inc., also known as and doing business as Sealright Paving and Grading. This aerial map shows the project location. The red stripes are the areas of infill for sidewalk, where sidewalk's missing, and also there will be ramp upgrades to meet current ADA requirements. This particular area, you notice not all of the streets are included. Those are focus routes for people that live in the area bounded by Gateway and 4th Street and Central, if they're heading northwest towards Rotary Park, towards the River Trail to Cleveland. Those are our excuse me, designated routes. And so that is how we received the CMAQ, the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Grant, for these improvements. Also included with this project, you see the 2 green dots appeared on the screen. Those are rectangular rapid flashing beacon assemblies, and they are to be installed at the crosswalk of Central Avenue and Gateway. And just for your information, the picture that just came up is one of those assemblies. It's a push button activated by a pedestrian, and when they press the button, the lights in that rectangular portion flash back and forth, and that is to alert motorists that there is a pedestrian that is going to be crossing in that crosswalk. These are also solar powered assemblies. We're also working with the Union Pacific Railroad, and I just wanted to take an opportunity to point out that we're working on a project with them to provide additional panels of that railroad crossing. If you're familiar with that particular crossing, it's very narrow, only accommodates cars, and so people that are walking and pushing strollers, et cetera, have to maneuver across the bumpy rocks that are in the railroad bed area. So it would be a 50-50 share project with the railroad picking up half the cost. We'll probably have to replace all the panels to do the widening, but very much a worthwhile project. We've actually been working on that project at the same time we were working with Union Pacific for the trail undercrossing, with the ultimate goal being pedestrian accessibility both sides of the river going to the northwest. A little bit about our bidding process. We advertise for bids twice in the Madera Tribune, and we advertise at least 30 days in advance of our bid opening. And then we also use our online portal on the city's website. It's called eBid Board, and that reaches out to plan rooms and contractors all over the state, really. And so that's where we see most of our activity is on the online eBid Board. We received 9 bids for the project. So it was a popular project for these contractors to bid on, and it was good timing. There are federal funds in the project, so there was a disadvantaged business enterprise or DBE goal of 11%. And we'll point out that Whitbro or Sealright actually committed to 41% because they have a DBE concrete subcontractor. So which, this being a sidewalk project, the majority of the work is concrete. Also, the process includes checking the subcontractors and the contractors for current licenses. And so here is the list of the bids that we received. There was 9, and the engineer's estimate was $419,226. That's listed at the bottom of the table. You can see we were above our low bidders, which is what we like to see. We'd like to be about right in the middle of all the bids. So again, Whitbro, they submitted the lowest bid, and they were responsive to the DBE goal requirements and in meeting all of the other requirements for our bid documents. The projected cost going into construction is about $500,000, and that includes the construction contract, the 10% contingencies that we're requesting to cover unforeseen issues that may come up. It also covers the construction engineering portion, which is construction management, inspection, and any special testing that's required. These costs are within our funds available. We have $520,000 in our CIP budget from the federal CMAQ or Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Funds, and also local transportation funds. Upon approval to award the contract, there would be a notice to proceed issued. We're projecting in January. We'll probably get started after the holidays, and there are some submittals that need to be approved before they can move forward. And the estimated completion date would be in spring, around April of this next year. So our recommendation is adopting the resolution that approves the contract award for the Gateway Central 3rd East Street project in the amount of $383,857 to Whitbro. And I also want to point out that that resolution does include the approval for the contingencies as well. So that's included in that resolution. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Garcia. Helen, I do have a question, and you might have touched on this before in your previous presentations, but why is it that the contingencies and all other costs are not factored into the total bids when these contractors are presenting their bids?
The contingencies are for unknown conditions, and often when we get into construction, especially underground construction, we don't always know what we'll encounter. And so that's why we establish these contingencies, so we can address them as they come up and keep the contractor moving without incurring additional costs of stopping work, bringing these items back, and then starting it up again. So, and because of contracts and the way projects are done, I mean, the percentages are fixed. So I'm assuming that, I don't know whether it be 10 or 15% of the contingency. I mean, is that not always a factor when we're taking into consideration a project or these contractors? And the reason why I say it is because, you look at the bid and the bid looks pretty attractive, but after you tack in all the contingencies and all other inspections and testings, then you're looking at additional $127,000. And just, I guess for my sake is I'd like to know, is the contingency something that the city puts in place, or is that something that the bidder then leaves out purposely?
Council?
Yes.
Ellen, is that okay?
Pardon me. Oh, did I freeze?
No, is it okay if I respond?
Oh, certainly.
Thank you. Councilmember Rodriguez and Mayor and Council, when public works contracts are bid, responses are submitted, and there's a very specific process laid out by the Public Contract Code, and they're assessed, they're reviewed to make sure they're responsive, and then the city must award to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. And they bid on what it's going to cost them. They bid on the specs. That's what the city's required to put out some specifications, and they bid on the specs and what it's going to cost them. And then the city awards to the lowest responsive and responsible. And then cities decide from their experience that it's helpful to include a contingency. All of a sudden, there's something when they dig underground, there's a broken trench that they hadn't accounted for, 60-year-old sewer system that's problems that was not accounted for in the engineer's estimate, et cetera, et cetera. And so the different cities assess different contingencies, anywhere from 5 to 15%, depending on the situation.
Thank you, Hilda. So again, I'm assuming that the provisions in that bidding process do not allow for contingencies. That's taken upon the city's behalf to make sure that we have adequate funding to be able to make this project happen. And the reason I say this is because over my tenure here, I've seen projects that have change orders. And within those change orders, I think we're covering them with these contingencies. I just wanted to clarify if the bidder purposely left out that because of some provision. I think you answered that.
Right. The contractor can't just low bid and then say, I'll just get my money through a change order. There's very specific requirements for engaging in the change order process, and it has to be a real need. Sometimes the city on its own will ask for a change order. If the contractor asks for the change order, then it's a city's obligation to review the change order to ensure that it's not something that should have been included in the original bid.
Thank you for clarifying that, Hilda and Helen. Thank you again for presenting that. Mr. Mayor, that's all my questions.
Thank you very much. If no one else has any questions, I don't see any hands raised. Alicia, do we have any public comment on this issue?
No, Mayor, we do not.
Thank you very much. Then I'll bring it back to my colleagues for action regarding D2.
Mayor, move to approve D2 as presented.
Second the motion. Sorry.
That's fine. It is a motion to approve item D2 by Council Member Steve Montes and seconded by Councilwoman Cici Gallegos. Alicia, could you call the roll, please?
District 1?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 4?
Yes.
District 6?
Yes.
Mayor Garcia.
Aye.
Final vote is 6 yes, motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we move on to item D3, Madera Municipal Airport Runway 826 runway closure markings. I believe this item is covered by Mr. Daniel Foss.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. And okay, everybody see my screen there okay?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about the closure of one of the two runways. That's kind of a long time coming out at the Madera Municipal Airport. So the background is the airport owns, or I'm sorry, the city owns the airport. And right now we have two current runways. They are for public use only. We do not have commercial flights on those airports or on our airport at this time, although we're open to it. How is the airport funded? It's an enterprise fund. So all the money that we do get from the airport goes right back into the airport. So we get money generated through hangar space that we rent. We have quite a few hangars out there that are full all the time. I'll show you a picture of that in a moment. But we have quite a waiting list to get into the hangars. And then the other spaces that we do lease out is land space. And then people build private hangars onto those. And usually those are at least 20-year agreements. And they'll build, we have one being built as we speak that's fairly far along, one that's in the process. We have a lot of interest in those, and that's continuing to grow. And those are the much bigger private jets that are stored in those facilities for the most part. We also have fuel tax out at the airport, which is growing every year. We recently are proud to announce that we have a flight school that's operating out of there, which has drastically increased. They have 8 planes, so it's drastically increased our fuel usage out at the airport, which is additional tax revenue for us. We do get grants, mostly through the FAA. We recently got one which purchased a sweeper for the airport, a smaller sweeper for the runway. And there's quite a few grant opportunities for the airport. And then we do have 2 small offices that are inside the hangar or the airport facility. If you've ever been out there, the city-owned airport, I'm drawing a blank on what it's called, but our main building out there has 2 small offices inside that are leased to the same individual, both of them. And there is no charge for pilot to land or take off at the airport. So here's an overhead of the airport in general. This is oriented north, so the top of your screen should be the north side. And we will highlight in a couple other pictures some of the specifics we're talking about. The main runway you can see is the long runway, and then the shorter runway on the south side is the one that we'll be closing or asking to close. So this here is the main runway. This we're not going to be asking for any action at this time. This runway is used quite a bit and it's getting continued growth on it, and we're seeing more and more traffic on this runway. These here are the larger hangars we had talked about. This is a satellite image, so this image is a little bit old. We actually have already seen some growth over here since this photo was taken. These are long-term lease agreements where we lease the land and people generally build private hangars onto the land. And we're seeing, again, a lot of interest into that area right now. These are the smaller hangars, usually private planes. They call them T-hangars, and they're your smaller two-seater planes. There's some four-seater planes in there, but I'll tell you this, they wouldn't fit four of me in them, and I don't need a longer runway. So they're fairly small planes, but sometimes I wonder who's flying, who would risk that going into the air and taking them off, but they do. And again, those are very long wait to get in there. So we have a lot of interest in our hangars there. We have an excellent airport here, and it's starting to get a lot of attention, and people are aware of it, and they're trying to move in. And this here is what we're talking about today. This is runway 826, or they call it the crosswind runway. And this is the one that we have for several years been looking at closing. So runway 826, it's used exclusively for agricultural aircraft. So your crop dusters is what have taken off and landed at this runway. It's commonly referred as a crosswind runway, has received little to no maintenance and is rarely used. And we'll talk about that in a second too in another slide, but that's very important for us, why we're considering closing it. Closure has been in the process for over 25 years. It's a very long process when you're working with the FAA to go through anything at the airport. And closures of runways is a big deal. It has to make sure that it goes through all the proper steps so that it gets properly identified and closed and everybody notified. These pictures here, as well as on the next slide I'm going to show, is some of the condition of the runway. And you can kind of see, if you look there, how the asphalt's separating. We're seeing some divots and potholes in the runway. It has not been maintained. This one here just shows that again. The road's in very bad condition, or the runway. So here's a little bit of a timeline. And this is a very rough timeline because it's been going on for a very long time, but we'll give you some type of overview of what we're looking at. So in 1993, and here's where this all started, we were notified by the FAA that we would not be receiving any more funding through the FAA for that runway. And the major reason is it's called a crosswind runway, and they're used so that if the wind comes to a certain level at your main runway, we can use the secondary runway. Well, it was found that 98.9% of the time our main runway could be used, so there's no real need for a crosswind runway. So when we found that there was going to be no more funds coming in for maintenance of that runway, it was explored that we need to start looking at closing that runway. So in 2015, the Madera County, and I'm going to use my cheat sheet, Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan is what that acronym stands for. We presented a plan to close the runway once the permit for the land use of that runway as an ag runway was closed, which expired in 2019. So in 2019, the permit did expire. In 2020, we filled out that form there, which is a letter to deactivate the runway. And when you fill out that, it's not just a simple letter. It has to be sent out to, I believe, every airport in the nation saying, hey, this runway is being shut down. You want to make sure that nobody, and there's no risk of anybody ever landing on that runway after it's been closed. So in 2021, we're looking at the runway officially being closed. And this is the absolute final step to the runway closure. So this took several years of research and consultation to complete the closure process. We recently signed with a consulting firm that's been helping us through these final steps as well. It's rather involved with several pages of checklists to complete. And each one of those checklists is not just a checkbox. It's each one of those is heavily involved of steps you've got to do. We've worked extensively with the FAA and Caltrans and private consultation firms to complete the process. So the closure was approved in 2015, and the city has had several meetings with local aviation committees to make sure we're all on the same page and everybody's aware of what's coming and everybody's in agreement for it. There was a workshop at council in 2019. The city council has reiterated its support evidenced by recent improvements, and that's for the main runway itself. And our main goal for the airport is to increase and expand our opportunities out at the airport. And we're seeing that. I think we're seeing that more now than we have in recent history. and it's not stopping. The airport, when I came over to Public Works, I did not think it would be one of the major operations. It is one of the major operations, and it's definitely one of the ones that receives the most attention. There's a lot of interest in our airport right now. So our impact to the airport will be very little to none. In fact, actually, it could increase the activity out at the airport. I have this picture here because we have the Porsche Club that meets quarterly, I believe, out at the airport, and that runway can be used for activities such as that. So we can use it now for other activities besides just for aircraft. It's already heavily restricted as it is. It's not used at all. And any aircraft that was using it before has easy access to the main primary runway. And the runway also will not be removed. It will be marked with large X's in the special paint. And they have a special process where they have to actually scar up the runway a little bit and then paint it with an X so that you can see it clearly from the air that this is a closed runway. So again, we've seen a lot of renewed interest out at the airport, which is a good thing. We're making a lot of effort to make sure that people see we're paying, while people pay attention to it, we want to make sure that people are very aware that we as a city are paying attention to it, that we're identifying some of these things that, hey, this is a derelict runway, let's close it down and use it for other services or other purposes. So we're seeing a lot of interest out there, and that's very good. And this, the bottom bullet point I do want to very much express here, we're not looking at reducing operations at the airport. We're actually looking at increasing operations at the airport. So it kind of sounds like that's what we'd be doing. We'd be reducing, we're closing one of the two runways, but it's the exact opposite. This runway is not needed to continue the operations at the airport or even expand. So our recommendation is to adopt a resolution approving an agreement with Anderson Striping and Construction Incorporated relating to the Madera Municipal Airport runway 826 closure markings in the amount of $15,325. Again, this is the final step in the closure of that runway, and it marks it with large X's so it's visible from the air anywhere that the runway is actually closed. So as an alternative, the council may elect to not approve the Madera Municipal Airport runway closure markings or request that we reject the bids and request additional bids. We did go through the bid process on this, and this was the lowest of the three bids that we received. The other thing I would like to say on this one, here's the final picture of the airport again. And I thought about it after the slideshow, but there might be some question of, can we do this in-house? It's not something that we can do in-house because FAA is very strict and very regulated on how things need to be approached. And it's not just simple X's on the roadway. The roadway has to actually be scarred with a special piece of equipment and then painted over that scarring. And from what I understand, that makes it much more permanent, makes it last longer. And I don't know if it's for the purpose of actually causing damage to the runway or not, so nobody can go on it. But I do know that it's a special process that we're not able to do in-house. And with that, is there any questions we have for this one?
I do not see any hands raised. Any of my colleagues, Councilwoman Gallegos?
Yes, Interim Public Works Director Foss, I would like to thank you for the work that was put in, and Mary Churches also was part of this at the beginning and working with our airport commissioners on it. And I thank you for working diligently to make sure that this runway still can be used, because originally there was a lot of talk back and forth about totally taking it out. And so there was concern about if there was an emergency, would that be available? So I'm elated to hear that we're going to keep it, even though we're going to mark it up and put X's on it. It's a good thing that it's going to be there and can be used by the Porsche Club or some other entity. So thank you for the time and effort. It wasn't easy because I've gotten a lot of phone calls, texts, and emails about unhappy pilots and everything. And that airport, and I'm sure you've gotten a load of that too. So thank you for your efforts in working with that, and I'm glad to hear the outcome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for recognizing that too, because I get to present it and take the glory, I guess. But again, this has been going on for 25 years, so there's a whole lot of people that did a lot of work to get where we are now.
Seeing no more hands raised, I think we can move on. Thank you very much, Mr. Foss, for that report. So I will bring it back for action by my council members on item D3.
Mayor Garcia, did you open it for public comment?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Alicia, do we have any public comment?
No, Mayor, I do not.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councilwoman Gallegos. Can we now move for action, please? On
With that,
item D3?
with that, I move to approve D3 as presented.
Second.
Motion to approve D3 by Councilwoman CC Gallegos Foley and second by Mr. Montes. Alicia, can we have the roll call, please?
That was Councilmember Rodriguez, Mr. Mayor.
You guys are going to have to be a little bit more, wait, show me your shirt and I know who I'm looking at.
I figured by now you recognize my voice.
No. I apologize, Mr. Rodriguez.
And for the roll call vote, I'll start with District 1,
Yes.
District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
Yes.
District 4,
Yes.
District 6.
Yes.
Mayor Garcia,
Yes.
motion passes with 6 yes votes.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item D4, amendment number 1 to the agreement with Stantec Consulting Services Incorporated to update the waste discharge permit for the city's wastewater treatment plant. Again, Mr. Foss, if you could help us out here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council, and we'll do the same thing again. So today we're going to be talking about wastewater treatment plant or wastewater treatment facility. And now before I jump into this, some of this might be common knowledge for some of the council members, which I do apologize. When I came over to Public Works, this was one that I really had to tackle and understand from the ground up. So I spent a little bit of time, and maybe some of this terminology might be common knowledge. I apologize, but I wanted to make sure we're all on the same page while we go through this. So we're talking about the wastewater treatment plant out at Avenue 13 and Road 21.5. Right now, the wastewater treatment plant is capable of managing 10.1 million gallons per day of wastewater. Now, your wastewater is everything that goes down the drain. So it's everything that you have in the shower, in your sink, in your toilet. It's obviously what we think of the most is your toilet water, but that's a small portion of what actually ends up at the wastewater treatment plant. If it goes down the drain, it ends up at our wastewater treatment plant. And ultimately, what the wastewater treatment plant's job is to do is to eventually get that back into the groundwater so it can be recycled, and we're just recycling water always, forever. So the wastewater treatment plant is capable of handling 10.1 million gallons per day. However, we're only permitted to handle 7 million gallons per day. Right now, we're operating at just over 5 million gallons per day. So we're operating at about half of what we're capable of doing, which is very good news because we have quite a room for growth, but we have to be permitted to go above 7. And right now, when I did the averages, we're at about 5.1, but when we have continuous growth, that is getting close to the 7, and you don't want to be right up against it when you need the extra million gallons per day. So that wastewater treatment facility, as you can imagine, because we are talking about wastewater, is heavily regulated by the State Regional Control Board. And it's heavily regulated. Virtually every employee out there has to have special certificates to operate out there. And they have a lot of testings. We have a lab on the facility that tests the water regularly to make sure that we're processing it accordingly. So it's a heavily regulated facility. And the Water Control Board, as I'm just putting down there for the acronym for we all understand, when I refer to RB, it's the Regional Board or Regional Water Quality Control Board. So here's an overhead of the wastewater treatment facility. It's a massive facility. So you can see the facility itself, which is big by itself at the bottom right corner of the picture. And most of the rest of what you see there are ponds. I believe we have 9 ponds. Some of those ponds are inactive. There's clearly more than 9 rectangles here. Some of those are inactive. Currently, we have 9 ponds active. The ponds is the final process for your wastewater treatment facility. So we go through a massive process where we're getting all the solids out of the wastewater treatment facility. Most of that, or out of the water, most of those solids have to be picked up. And I actually brought an item to council for a contract with that about 4 to 6 months ago, where we agreed to a contract with a company that comes and picks up the solids. Those solids are usually used as fertilizer or other purposes. And then once we get to where it's a more pure looking water, it goes into the ponds, and then it sinks back obviously into the ground or evaporates into the air, and you've recycled your water. So current population growth is 0.8% per year over the last decade. That's what our average has been. State regulations require permittees to notify the regional board when any flows or treatment capacity may exceed in the next 4 years based on flow and capacity projects. So what that means is if we're doing 0.8% per year, in the next 4 years, are we going to hit that 7 million gallons per day? Probably not. Now, before this changed recently. It used to be if you hit the 80%, which we're very close to the 80%, then you had to get permitted for the next process. That changed during the boom because cities were growing so fast that they didn't have time, and they were actually stopping city growth because they weren't allowed to be permitted. So it changed for economic reasons more than anything, but it's something that we need to be very aware of and plan far in advance. We don't want to be encroaching upon that 7 million gallons per day and be in an emergency situation, because this can be a very expensive process to go through. So you want to plan this out as far in advance as possible. So potentially the wastewater treatment facility could be operating at over 7 million gallons per day in the next 20 years. Again, this is a very much a long-term goal, but each one of these steps is expensive. And I think it's very important that we plan accordingly and make sure that we're spreading this out as much as possible so that we're never encroaching upon, oh, we've got 3 years and we're going to be over. The overall process, as I said, can be exceptionally expensive. So it's wise to plan far in advance. So we initiated talks with the regional board for a renewal permit to increase treatment capacity from 7 million gallons per day to 10.1 million gallons per day. Those talks were initiated with Stantec, who's the company that we're looking at amending this contract with today. And they reached out to the regional board and explained the process of how we want to move forward. It included the preparation of a report to the wastewater, report of water discharge, preparation of documents, meetings, regional board staff. So what that means is how much wastewater we're discharging per day and meeting with the board to ensure that we're where we're supposed to be under the permit process. So the regional board responded requesting additional information from the wastewater treatment facility to be permitted to treat flows above 7 million. And that's where we're at today. So they basically responded and said, hey, we need some more information. If you want to go above 7 million gallons per day, we're going to need some more information, which we're going to cover here in just a second. The requested data would include groundwater. I'm going to touch on this briefly because I'll go into it more. Included groundwater information, impact to the groundwater, water balance. And what that means is if your ponds start overflowing, then your water is not percolating like it's supposed to be into the soil or evaporating. It's actually flooding their streets and everything else. So we need to make sure it can handle that capacity. And 100-year storm, I wasn't sure what that meant exactly, but what that means is we look at what's the worst storm we've had in the last 100 years and what's the worst storm we're looking at having in the next 100 years. Can our facility survive the worst storm that's happened in the last 100 years? So really it's just being storm-proof, because your ponds in a terrible storm will fill up with rainwater, and that impacts your ability for the wastewater treatment plant to process water. So the process is broken down into 6 steps is what we're looking at the amended contract of doing. So the contract amendment is necessary to accomplish several tasks that the regional board has asked us to accomplish. And the additional information will allow us to understand, do we want to go this process and increase up to 10 million gallons per day with the regional board. So task 1 is support services for groundwater monitoring well installation. So the groundwater monitoring wells, what those are is we take a portion of all the water that goes to the end of the process. They go into a groundwater, and we can monitor it. We can check the chemical levels of it. We can see how it's doing, make sure we're processing it accordingly. Well, right now, 7 of our 8 groundwater monitoring wells have dried up because of the drought. After the drought, we never reopened them. We never invested the money to get them back reopened. So we're not exactly sure of their condition at this time. Those dried up in 2015, so it's not been terribly long. And I think if we do wait much longer, as you know, if you don't use it, it gets worse and worse. So it's something that we do, I think, definitely want to look into to see how we can get those back open. We're on our last one right now, and we used to have 8. I think it's important that we at least understand what it's going to cost to get those back operational. Developing a strategy to repair or reconstruct those groundwater monitoring wells. Once a plan has been developed, it will be submitted to the regional board for approval. Again, regional board is heavily involved with everything at wastewater treatment facility. So even once we decide, okay, we want to fix them, we have to go to the regional board to get approval. Formal plans are not required, which is good. We won't need formal plans. Once we get approval from the regional board, we can repair them. Stantec will assist in soliciting and reviewing bids for repair and reconstruction of the groundwater monitoring wells. During well construction, Stantec will monitor installation and ensure standards of regional board are being maintained. And Stantec will complete the report on the new wells and submit the information to the regional board. The total cost for task 1 is $60,000. Task 2 is preparation of quarterly groundwater monitoring reports. So starting even now with just the one well, they will repair reports which contain the following information, which is a summary of the groundwater results, completed narrative, completed evaluation of an impact to the groundwater, and scaled map relevant to facility features and monitoring stations. So it'll just show the map, which has to be completed for the regional board of where the groundwaters are, and as I understand it, where the water is most impacting the ground. Okay, anti-degradation analysis. I think I said that right. So what this is necessary to quantify the impact of the wastewater treatment facility effluent, which is when the wastewater is being percolated into the ground, how much impact is it having on the groundwater itself? Now, if you go look at the facility and the water actually going into the ponds looks very clear. It looks very clear, looks very clean, but it's not yet drinking water. The final process is for it to be filtered through the ground. But if we're flooding the ground with too much of unpurified, fully drinkable water, then we're not getting good drinking water into the ground. So it has to go in at a certain rate and speed. So task 3 is to make sure it's actually percolating into the ground at that rate, not too much, not too little, and that we're getting drinking water back into the ground. This is a long test. It's something that they'd have to examine for a long time. So it'd be completed in March of 2023, and it's a total cost of $25,000. Task 4 is capacity assessment. So this again is just making sure we have been rated and reviewed already for 10.1 million gallons, but this would be going back and again ensuring that monthly and historical data for where we're at currently and future needs of the facility can go up to 10.1 million gallons. This would assume, which is different than we've had in the past, a growth of 2.5 annual growth rate for the city. I think 0.8, which was the average for the last 10 years, has increased. And I think it's going to continue to increase. And I think we need to err on the side of caution. So it's always good to make sure we're preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. But I don't know that growth is ever bad, but it does come with some expenses. Total cost for this is $25,000. All right, test 5 is the water balance. So we'll use all the previous data to prepare a 100-year stormwater balance calculation. So again, this is where I had said, worst storm in 100 years, can we maintain it? Would our ponds fill up? Would they flood everything? And then that involves heavy, heavy fines if your ponds do flood over. And this would provide us the information needed to be able to determine, just like I said, if our ponds can take that. So that's task 5 is $20,000. And contingency, this is the final one. This is for anything that may come up or arise. We do have $17,000 for that. To tap into the $17,000, they would need to get written permission from the Director of Public Works to spend any of those funds. So $17,000 over a couple-year contract. We don't anticipate much coming up, but it is there. just in case. So overall, we're looking at $157,000 total, and this does include the contingency of $17,000. So with that, I would like to recommend that we adopt a contract modification with Stantec for the wastewater treatment facility permit assistance. And is there any questions?
I don't see any hands raised. Is there anyone of my colleagues wishing to speak on this issue? Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Garcia. I did have a question. Only if you can pull that the total and the task cost, Mr. Foss, if you'd mind, please. I don't know if you can pull that back up. Well, I mean, here's what it comes down to. A lot of the cost there is basically data driven, and my question is, a lot of these costs here, do they require actual physical presence here and monitoring stuff, or is it data that they draw from somewhere and compute that and give us some analysis or assessment of where we're at?
So I want to make sure I answer this correctly and accurately for you, but as I understand it, the wastewater treatment facility is heavily self-sufficient, running through modern equipment. With that said, it still would be a hands-on approach for most of it. So if we look at task 1, support services for groundwater monitoring well, that's going to be a hands-on a lot, because they're going to have to come out, look at our wells, see what we're looking at, probably do some construction, dig some parts of it up and see where we're at. Those are big operation wells. They're not a small well. And that's why that one's the most expensive, I think. For part 2, preparation for quarterly groundwater, that might not have to be too much on site. I mean, I would imagine that once they get most of the information from task 1, they're going to be able to complete that process somewhat to some degree remotely. The third one, well, they do though on task 2, if you recall, they'll be monitoring the installation. So they're going to be in charge, although they won't install it, they're going to be in charge of monitoring it. So they're going to be the foreman to some degree. The anti-denic I'm not even going to attempt it, but step 3, that one would be hands-on again. They're going to have to come out and take samples of the soil. We do have a lab on premise there, but we do not take these type of samples for at the level that they're going to need at the regional board. And some of that is not just the data, but then of course you're paying for the lab facilities and the staffing and everybody else that is capable of running that data. The capacity assessment, if I remember on this one, let me go back myself. Capacity assessment, I would imagine, is a lot what you're referring to. That's going to be database. That's going to be databased almost exclusively. It is a $25,000 fee on that. I don't think that that's excessive for when you are looking at a consulting firm for these type of things, especially when they're going to be presenting that to a regional board. But that's just my opinion of it, and I will say, I will admit my opinion's limited on this. I don't have a whole lot of experience with it. And then this one is our last one besides the contingency. So this one again would be somewhat data-based, but it's also going to be a little bit of hand-on. They're going to have to examine our ponds. They're going to have to examine the levees. They're going to have to examine how much flow they are having out of the levees. I'd imagine they'd have to examine somewhat of the streets and see how close they are to the roadways and everything else. I don't know if I answered your question greatly.
No, well, yeah, certainly you touched on some of these tasks here. And based on your knowledge here, none of this can be done in-house to save money on this particular agreement.
I did ask the same question myself, and especially for the lab facilities alone, we don't have the lab that can handle this. And even if we say tried to contract each individual piece, and as anybody knows, if you try to be your own subcontractor, sometimes you can save money. So if we took each individual task and chopped it up and tried to save funds, that was the question I asked. I don't think, would we save some? I think we would. Would we cause a lot of hardship and potentially not be able to even complete it? Possibly, because each one of these by themselves, besides task 1, is not overly pricey. And if we would subcontract each out and saved 20% on each one, say, it would become much harder to then put it all together and make a report to the regional board. Does that make sense? So a lot of it is going to be for simplification, and a lot of it is too, when you're working with the same company that's very familiar with your plant, then it makes it easier to get approval through the regional board.
Great. And last but not least, so I know that we had an original agreement back in 2018, but because we're trying to go beyond the allotted amount of gallons per day, we have to take on this to be able to get that permit. Is that correct?
Correct. So the original agreement was to see if we're able to go up to, we initiated conversation with the regional board of, hey, would we be allowed to go beyond 7 million gallons per day? And the regional board responded with, yes, you will, but you're going to have all these data for us.
And this is why we're here today. So thank you, Director Daniel Foss. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
I see no more hands raised. Anyone else? Alicia, do we have any public comment on this item?
No, Mayor.
Then I will bring it back to my colleagues for action.
I move to approve item D4 as presented.
Second.
Motion to approve item D4 by Councilmember Stephen Montes, second by Councilwoman CC Gallegos Foley. Alicia, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. District 1?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 4?
Yes.
District 6?
Yes.
Mayor Garcia?
Yes.
And the motion passes with 6 yes votes.
Thank
you
you
very much, Mr. Foss. Thank you very much, Mr. Foss. Thank you for that report. Moving on to item D5, submittal of local early action planning grants program, LEAP grant application in the amount of $300,000. I believe this is by Mr. Gary Kant.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. I appreciate the opportunity to go ahead and give this presentation. This is actually going to be a tag team between the planning department and that of grants in the involvement because of the efforts that are required for this particular grant request. And so I will turn over the first part over to Yvette to begin the presentation, for which then I'll pick up the tail end of that.
Thank you. And good evening again, Mr. Mayor and council members. And I believe you can see my full screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. As my colleague, Mr. Conti, said, this is a joint collaboration between the planning and the grants department. And we are requesting that you authorize a resolution this evening for submittal of a grant application for the LEAP program. What is LEAP? LEAP is the Local Early Action Planning Grants Program. It's part of a state allocation of $250 million that was approved in recent budgets to address the state's housing shortage and high housing costs. The LEAP program specifically aims to provide funding and technical assistance to local governments to help prepare, adopt, and implement plans and process improvements that are going to streamline housing approvals and accelerate housing production. So the funding is available. The funding available is calculated based on the size of the population in the jurisdiction. And as you can see on this table, given our 60+ population, the city is eligible for up to $300,000 under this funding source. The city is intending to submit an application for the full amount. And what we are intending to do is to combine the LEAP funding with the SB2 funding. Last year, staff brought before you a similar request to adopt a resolution allowing staff to submit a grant application for SB2 funds. And the SB2 funds, very similar to LEAP, aims to provide funding and technical assistance to help local governments. Same thing, to prepare, adopt, and implement plans that will streamline housing approvals and accelerate housing production. On September 18th of 2019, Council approved the resolution for staff to apply and to accept SB2 funding in the amount of $310,000. The city was awarded the full amount earlier this year on January 2020. And so the LEAP funding would be used to supplement those $310,000 to do a project. And I will turn it over now to my colleague, Mr. Conti, to talk about the project.
Thank you. And the project, and for a number of you folks on the dais, you're familiar with, and that's referred to as the creation of a North Madera master plan that would encompass roughly 1,900 acres of land that's located just to the north of the city's sphere, or it is within the sphere, excuse me, but just north of the city limits. There has been interest over time to develop that area, but however, it's fragmented. The areas of interest do not fully align with the current city limits. And the other component of it is that we do not have a complete infrastructure plan and thus a financing plan to finance those particular infrastructure to service those areas. In order to do so, we would need to provide a master plan, a strategy in a sense on how to incorporate and embrace those particular developments and be able to service those particular developments. So it's a large task. And then when the SB2 plan came before you, again, that cost was for $310,000. And at that time, it was expressed that that was a lofty goal for about the money that we would have available to us at the $310,000. And certainly we would have to seek additional monies to, in fact, pursue that endeavor and to actually bring it to fruition. And that is what we're doing here. So if you would bring the next slide up, Yvette. And these were the targeted areas that was done in the workshop, as identified at that time as of an interest. As you can tell, it spreads in a greater area than what we have as the 1,900 acres. It basically kind of covers what we refer to in our general plan as Village A and Village C, or portions thereof, those two particular villages plan concepts. And we have clear guidance within our general plan as to how we proceed with that. And this is what this particular master plan would engage and direct us to do, and take those blocks or planning blocks to, again, enable development to occur in those areas. Next slide, please. As you can see, there's continuation of various different block areas, and you can see this area has now been reduced to more of a plausible area, which now takes you down to the 1,900 acres approximately. With key target areas being planned, you'll notice that you have an area 1A, which that in a sense represents the new high school, the Matilda Torres High School today. And then we have other areas that are key. You'll see a block of number 2, area number 4. These have been interest by development community is trying to move forward. But obviously, as you can tell, we are a long stretch from the city bounds and thus infrastructure. And this is what this particular plan will drive towards. Next slide, please. So the anticipated phases of the North Madera master plan area it would involve, once we've developed a plan of the types of uses, predominantly this is a residential area, but there will be commercial area components, there'll be other elements, amenities, if you will, park and recreation pieces. To service this area, we will look at that as a collective body and actually look at this as a complete and cohesive plan, as opposed to what we're now experiencing now in the north end of the town, which is a project by project, and we're dealing with these piecemeal situations, and it's becoming problematic in regards to circulation and how best to service this area and how to consider what and how upsizing of the appropriate utilities need to be to really look at a larger area and serve the area as best. So the village plans that we have in our general plan, they're very broad brush, if you will. They just basically identify this area as much to be a low density residential community. But we intend to obviously recognize that maybe we need some massaging to make sure that we are incorporating and embracing the interests of the community that surrounds these areas, as well as some of the development interests, as well as, more importantly, the interest of the city as a whole. To annex, it requires a pre-zoning to determine what actual land use zoning districts shall be for those lands, so that now we are working with the actual development standards that would be applicable for the actual entitlements, meaning residence, a commercial building, and so on and so forth. Towards that end, we need to determine how and best we provide water, sewer, drainage, and alike to these areas. And so we will be defining that as part of that master planning effort, as part of the our infrastructure master plan for that particular study area. And then more importantly is, how much is that really going to cost? And how do we share that cost amongst the various development interests that would go over time? This is something that doesn't happen overnight, and certainly doesn't happen in 5 years, nor likely in 10 years, but more like 20, 30 years out. And so you have to define these mechanisms and a fair share of mechanisms so that everybody is covering their costs appropriately, and the city is made whole. And so we have looked at we will be looking at strategies in regards to the annexation efforts. Annexation need not be all at once. They can come in pieces. In fact, we've actually had annexation that has occurred thus far. Recently, the LAFCO has approved the annexation of the lands that are just immediately south of the Love's Travel Center, south in between there, down to Ellis Avenue. That area has now been annexed into the city as a commercial area for future opportunity and development. But we have to determine its abilities to be serviced. And so those things will be a part of this planning effort. But we'll be looking strategically to those interests where we had defined as areas, 1 and areas 2, where there's immediate interest. And then also working our way to the area that's been identified in that previous slide to you as area 4, which is a more long-term consideration. To move forward with this and to consider the development opportunities in this area, all of that is subject to CEQA, or environmental review. We need to complete the environmental review as part of that process. To complete the analysis is a necessary step and a requirement before we can engage with the actual general plan amendments, should there be any, but more importantly, if any pre-zoning, and that of the annexations of the property, and ultimately the entitlements of that land, the physical development of those properties. Next slide, please. So my recommendation to you, or our recommendation to you as a staff, is to adopt a resolution authorizing the application for and the receipt of the LEAP support grant funding programs. It is a requirement of us to submit that as part of that application. Absent of this support by council would negate us the abilities to apply for the LEAP money of the $300,000. If granted and awarded the monies, which would come out now to a total of $610,000, this now becomes attainable for us to make that master plan analyses and all the master plan components of that, and then pursue the annexations of that property. And then, the work efforts here is much larger than what staff in-house can handle. We would then be seeking bids by consultants to go ahead and present to us a cost to move forward based on our RFP that we would be submitting out to them for the specific scope of services to bring this complete efforts in the North Madera Master Plan area to fruition. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions, but I also want to lead out, before I lead perhaps to the questions, I want to give a big thanks out to Adam Kyler, the gentleman that you met earlier before our city council meeting. He's put a tremendous amount of effort, and he's taken the charge at this point of putting this application together to be awarded the $300,000 from the state. And with that, again, I'll be more happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any of my fellow council members want to ask any questions regarding this item? Seeing none. Alicia, do we have anything from the public?
No, Mayor, we do not.
Thank you very much. I will now bring back item D5 for action by the council.
Move to approve item D5 as presented, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Second.
Been moved to approve item D5 by Councilmember Rodriguez and seconded by Councilmember Montes. Alicia, call the roll, please.
District 1,
Yes.
District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
Yes.
District 4, District 4.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Councilwoman Evans. District 6,
Yes.
Mayor Garcia.
Aye.
Motion passes with 6 yes votes and 0 no votes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alicia. Thank you very much, Mr. Conti and Ms. Rita, for that report. Moving on to item D6, appointing a third council member to the city's cannabis ad hoc committee. This report will be given by Mr. Arnoldo Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Members of the council, Arnoldo Rodriguez, City Manager. The item before you this evening was placed on the agenda at the request of Councilmember Rodriguez at the council meeting on December the 2nd. If you may recall, Councilmember Rodriguez had indicated that the Cannabis Ad Hoc Committee, which was previously comprised of Councilmember Rodriguez, now Mayor Garcia, and former Mayor Medellin, changed because former Mayor Medellin is no longer on the City Council, thereby leaving 2 current council members on the Cannabis Ad Hoc Committee, which again would be Mayor Garcia and Councilmember Rodriguez. By the Brown Act, you are allowed to have an ad hoc committee, but however, it cannot be comprised of more than the majority of the council. Because of the City Council has a total of 7 members, it would be a total of 3. And, you know, as I'm saying this, I just thought of something. We have a current vacancy. And as Hilda is acknowledging right now, I just, so I do apologize. I just thought of that. So, so with that being said, I think the recommendation this evening would be if the council is to appoint a third member to the ad hoc, we should wait until another council member is appointed to fill in Council District 5, which was vacated by now Mayor Garcia. And as I was saying it, I was thinking about it. So did I say that correctly, Hilda?
You did, and I think the light bulb lit up for me at the same time yours did.
Yeah.
At the same time?
Yeah.
So would it be appropriate to just pull this item and table it until January?
Yes.
Okay.
Quick question, Hilda. I'm sorry, Mayor Garcia. You did say, City Manager, that the ad hoc cannot be comprised of more or at least, did you say half of the council or more than half of the council?
It would be. I'm sorry, Hilda, please.
The half. You right now it would be if you have 3, it would be 50%, and so it would not be permissible.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And so, if I may, Mayor, with that being said, though, however, the 2 members of the Cannabis Ad Hoc Committee can continue to meet and can continue to give staff feedback. So the process is not going to be held up for the lack of the third ad hoc committee member. Rather, what we'll do is we'll continue to meet, and at such a time, a new council member is either appointed or elected in office. At that point, depending on where we're at on the process, on the cannabis ordinance, at that point, council will have the option of making a decision of either appointing a person or not appointing a person. So again, I do apologize. When I wrote the staff report, the light bulb did not go off until I was speaking, and it went off.
Okay, so it seems that we need a motion at this point to table until possibly February.
So my recommendation, Mayor, if it would be appropriate, would be to refer the item back to staff. And at that point, And then we would identify it on the agenda at a future date if that's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Now we move on to E, administrative reports. Discussion on savings achieved by refinancing the city's 2006 California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank, CIEDB, wastewater loan in the amount of $6,497,000 with a potential annual savings of $23,000 to the Sewer Enterprise Fund. I believe Mr. Sanchez, Roger, you will be reporting on this?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Roger Sanchez, Finance Director. Before I start, I'd like to introduce a few people who are our guests, and they have taken their time to visit with us. So we have Ken Dicker, financial advisor from Del Rio Advisors. We also have Nikki Tolman from Oppenheimer, brokerage firm. We also have David Fema from Jones Hall, who is are from a law firm. So before
Roger,
you,
Roger,
yes.
Right. Could I ask you a favor? Could you adjust your microphone? You're getting a lot of. It's difficult to understand you at some points.
I apologize. It's probably my connection. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. It just breaks up a bit. I don't know if you were able to adjust that or not, but go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Yes, unfortunately, I cannot adjust that. So before you, council members, we do have a discussion to bring before council and to provide a recommendation for a potential savings on the refinancing of current outstanding loans within the water sewer fund. In essence, we would like to take advantage of the lower interest rates and get some savings that are badly needed within the sewer fund. So with that, I'd like to pass the time over to Ken Dicker to provide a presentation for you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to share my screen and just go through a brief presentation here. Can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So the item before you tonight is to discuss the refinancing of what's commonly known as the iBank, the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank. The city entered into a loan for this transaction a number of years ago. We'll talk about the details in just a minute. As you may know, for those that are new to the council, the city does have numerous outstanding loans and bonds for various things throughout the city. They're mostly done for the city's sewer, water systems, to fund construction, for example, of the new fire station that we financed last year, and to fund solar projects. I know the solar projects are currently being installed. This evening, we are seeking direction to move forward on potentially refinancing existing loan for the city's sewer system. If directed by the council tonight, the financing team plans to bring the formal documents back for review and approval at the January 20th city council meeting. The original loan, it's called the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank Installment Sale Agreement. It was entered into in March 15th of 2006, in the original amount of $10 million. And interestingly, in going back to research this, it actually funded capital improvements to the city's wastewater treatment plant, including rehab of aging components and expansion of the permitted treatment capacity from 7 MGD to 10.1 MGD. I know that was an item on the council's agenda earlier this evening. The outstanding loan amount is $6.365 million. The final maturity is August 1 of 2035, so we've got about 15 years left. The call date, meaning the date in which the bonds can, or the loan can be paid off early, can be done on any date with no prepayment penalty. The current interest rate is at 3.01%. And in addition to the interest that you're paying to the iBank, you also do have an ongoing fee that's paid to them at 0.3% of the outstanding principal every year. So it is a little bit more than just the interest cost by itself. In October 2020, I did discover this in going through your audited financials. I did brief the city manager and the finance director on this potential opportunity. In addition to that, I did recommend at the time and continue to do so a direct placement sale method. There's two ways to do these obligations, these tax exempt or taxable obligations done by cities. You can do it as a public offering, which means that's sold to investors in a public document that's published. You go through a full rating process and everything. It's very time consuming and very expensive. A direct placement is directly placing the obligation with a commercial bank that operates in the public finance arena. It is lower cost of issuance. It's less time consuming. In addition, there's a rate lock. It's generally available. In this case, there is a rate lock available to the city. And the term of this at 15 years or less is kind of the sweet spot for most of the commercial banks that operate in this environment. The city manager and the finance director approved requesting proposals from direct placement lenders in a competitive process. That term sheet was sent to 15 different lenders. In addition, as we started down this process, we did have consultation with bond counsel, and David Fama is on the line with us this evening. They did enter into conversations with the CIEDB or the iBank. However, we did find out that they cannot certify that when we pay off this loan, that they can turn around in a reasonable time period and either call the bonds that they issued to loan you the money, or they can loan the money to other entities in a reasonable time period. Because of that, this would need to be done on a taxable basis. So just last week, we did receive 4 taxable proposals to refinance this. The 4 banks were BBVA Compass at a 2.41% interest rate, Sterling National Bank at 2.64, Municipal Finance Corporation at 2.90, and First Foundation Bank at 3.20%. The BBVA Compass offer means the interest rate is locked for 60 days. It is callable, meaning it can be redeemed at some future date after 7 years. And there's no reserve fund. Generally, in a municipal bond transaction, you'd be required to set aside a certain amount of money in the event of default. That would be the first line of defense. There is no reserve fund required in these direct placement loans. As Mr. Sanchez mentioned earlier, the financing team is Jones Hall. Dave Fama's on the line with us this evening. Brandis Tallman, a division of Oppenheimer, is acting as placement agent, and my firm, Del Rio Advisors, as municipal advisor. So the sort of the refinancing summary here, the proposed amount to be issued is $6.462 million. About $8,071,000 was the prior debt service. And that includes all the fees that would be paid to the IDB over, or the CIEDB over time. So not only were you paying interest, but you're also paying annual fees to them. No longer have to do that if the refinancing's recommended this evening. We estimate that the new refunding debt service would be $7,689,000 for total savings of $381,000 plus, which works out to be about $25,429 per year. And the net present value savings is just over 5%. The CD Act, the California Debt and Investment Advisory Commission, generally recommends savings of 3% or greater are considered significant. In this case, and some people look at 5%. We've met both of those thresholds here at just over 5% net present value savings. So here's what the new debt service schedule would look like, or here's what the savings are on an annual basis. They do decline just a little bit over time because, again, you're not paying those annual fees anymore. Again, $381,000 or average annual savings of a little over $25,000 per year. This is the cost of issuance related to this transaction. So bond counsel, placement agent, my fee. There is a bank counsel fee that we have to pay to the bank for their legal review. There is a regulatory fee that we have to pay the California Debt and Investment Advisory Commission. And then if there's any miscellaneous expenses, we just rounded it to $95,000. And I do want to point out that all the savings estimates and all the calculations include the payment of all those costs of issuance. So you are generating savings, including all of those costs. So in summary, The current agreement is currently subordinate to some bonds that were issued in 2015, the 2015 installment sale agreement for the sewer fund. After this refunding, this obligation will be on parity, so no longer subordinate with those bonds. And again, I discussed that the recommended method of sale here is a direct placement to the commercial banks, that we went out and did a very competitive process to secure the interest rates and the terms to this. Again, the lender was selected via competitive process. BBVA Compass is recommended as preferred lender because they had the lowest interest rate and very favorable terms for the city. The interest rate is locked through the proposed closing date of February 3rd of next year at a 2.41% rate. Annual savings of about $25,429 per year. Net present value savings in excess of 5%. And again, to remind the council, I'm very particular about this. We are not extending the term. We are not doing anything. We're simply generating economic savings by keeping the term of the loan the same and simply paying a lower interest rate. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and we have the other members with us as well.
I see no hands raised. Any of my colleagues wanting to speak? Yes, Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Garcia. Ken, so I just want you to clarify when you say can call the loan in 7 years, meaning that does that replace a prepay penalty? Is that what you're saying, that we can call on that loan?
No, it just means that you cannot call this new loan early for a period of 7 years, but by year 7 and any date thereafter, you'd call it with no prepayment penalty. So there's a lockout period of being able to refinance it again in the future, which is very common.
Okay, so do we have one now in the existing bond?
Yes, and we've gone beyond that lockout period. That's why this is now we can do this refinancing.
That's okay. Just want to clarify that was the case. Okay. Now I did see in your list there of cost. The original bond was for $8 million. The current balance now is $6.4 million, and we would be refinancing 7 million. Can you please expand on that? I just want to confirm the numbers there.
Yeah, let me just let me get back up to that real quick. Sorry.
And you'll have to forgive me since we didn't get the presentation in advance. I'll ask that question here now. So
no worries. Yeah, so there's currently outstanding $6,365,000, and we're planning to issue. I've got another screen here. $6,462,000, and the only reason is because you're paying off the prior loan and you're adding $95,000 to the cost of issuance. But even when you add that additional amount to a slightly higher amount, you still have annual debt service savings as presented tonight.
Okay. So, and that is a fixed rate for 15 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So I know in the past you brought up the possible variable with the market that we have today. Where do you see rates for certain bonds or municipal bonds like this now?
So I can tell you that we hit all-time lows in the municipal marketplace for both taxable and tax-exempt deals in August. And we're only about 10 or 15 basis points above that point right now in this market. So you are at or near all-time lows today. And every time I presented these refinancing opportunities, I say we're in an all-time low interest rate environment, but a lot of this is being driven by, economics today because of COVID and everything, right? So we are taking advantage. This would normally not be a refunding opportunity, but it is because we're in such an extremely low interest rate environment because of the tragedy that we're all experiencing.
Yeah, we've been seeing quite a bit of you here lately in the last couple of years. So it's a good thing though, right? I mean, we're getting a cost savings, and even though it's $25,000 a year, it's definitely a cost saving for the city, and that's always a cost saving for the taxpayer. So I see that as a benefit. Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Beaker.
Certainly.
I see no further hands. Anyone else wanting to speak on this item? We are looking for direction, Mr. Sanchez.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, what we're looking for is if you're in agreement that if you're okay, we can, you allow us to proceed towards the next steps. And on the next council meeting, we would like to bring an agreement and so that we may be authorized to sign those agreements.
Okay.
Would you like that direction in the form of a vote, Mr. Mayor? Or?
I would recommend you vote, please.
All right. Alicia, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
A motion?
A motion and a second, please.
I so move to approve E1 as presented.
Okay, I second E1 to give direction to staff.
Motion to approve E1 by Councilwoman CC Gallegos Foley, second by Councilmember Jose Rodriguez. Alicia, roll call vote, please.
District 1,
Yes.
District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
Yes.
District 4,
Yes.
District 6,
Yes.
Mayor Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes with 6 yes votes, 0 no.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Mr. Del Rio. Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. We will now move on to item E2, seeking direction regarding the 2021 regular city council meeting schedule by Mr. Arnoldo Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Mayor, members of the council. The item before you this evening is to discuss about the 2021 city council calendar for the upcoming year. Historically, the city council meets the first and third Wednesdays of the month. The second Wednesday of the month is historically reserved for the Housing Authority Board, which the council also sits on, as well as the successor agency to the Madera Redevelopment Agency. So the city council historically meets the first Wednesday of the month, the second and the third. And on occasion, as council is aware, we'll have special meetings, especially around April, May, and June during the capital improvement program when we're reviewing that, as well as the budget. The purpose for today is to simply is to begin the discussion for the 2021 calendar. I think it's best for both the council, the community, and staff if we talk about when we should be meeting and is it every meeting necessary. And if we take a look at potential training opportunities for council and holidays to make sure that they don't just make sure that there's no conflict. And again, this is simply for the regular calendar, knowing that on occasion we do have to have special meetings. So this past year, we had a couple of meetings, if you may recall. We had one on a Monday for COVID. We had a special one for CARES Act funding for CDBG and a couple of other meetings that were necessary at the time because we were pressed for time. So a couple of things that we took into account as we were coming up with the calendar. We looked at the League of California Cities trainings. They're historically in September, late September, early February, or late September, early October. With COVID, the dynamics are a little bit different because the trainings in January are going to be via online. Right now, the League of California Cities has not identified if the meetings in October or September are going to be in person or via online. The other thing we attempted to look at was the local school calendar. So we took a look at the Madera Unified School Calendar. We looked at their holidays. The only challenge is that Madera Unified School District has not identified the first day of the next school year. And so what we did is we looked at the calendar and we said, well, this last year, it was the latter part of August and it was the first Wednesday. And so we had to guess a little bit. And then again, we looked at holidays. So again, the items or the dates in green are regularly scheduled city council meetings for 2021. If there's a diagonal line that crosses out the date, that is generally a holiday. And if you take a look at the numbers identified in highlighted in red here, so towards the end of January, so the 21st and the 22nd, and then the 28th and the 29th, the League of California Cities will be hosting the new council members training seminars. Both seminars are the same. So the same material that's presented on the 21st and the 22nd is going to be the same material presented on the 28th and the 29th. The reason that they have two of them is one is typically held in Sacramento, the other one is typically held in Anaheim. And then at the end of September this year, the League of California Cities, typically in Long Beach, the September the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th will be having a conference down in Long Beach. And this past year, it was held online. And two years ago, myself and Councilmember Garcia and then Councilmember Robinson attended. And so we took a look at those days to make sure that our council meetings did not present a conflict. And you can obviously tell that there are no conflicts with scheduled meetings. So the other thing we took a look at was holidays and school schedules. And staff is recommending to council this evening to tentatively not have meetings on the 3 dates highlighted in red. So instead of having 24 regularly scheduled meetings in 2021, we would have proposed 21. And I'm simply going to walk through them. So April the 7th, we are recommending to not have our regularly scheduled meeting. The reason for that is the week before is spring break for our local school district. And someone would say, okay, well, it's not going to be impacted. Well, the reason we do that is because the prior week is packet week, and we would have to provide staff reports to the council. Thereby, if our employees have children in school and if they wanted to take that week off, they would have to come to work to finish the staff report. On top of that, that puts additional pressure on the community and council to try to read the reports in the packets during spring break. And we simply felt that this provides a good opportunity for our staff, the community, and council to take a break so they can enjoy spring break with their families. August the 18th, we are suggesting that we not have a meeting at this time. The reason for that is based on the current school year calendar. That was the third Wednesday in August was the first day of school. And as we all know, that can be a challenging day for a lot of us. Just because if you have kids, you're trying to get your kids ready. And so we felt that it would be appropriate to not have a meeting, just simply making it easier for the council, our community, who has a lot going on. First day of school just presents a lot of challenges. And on top of that, the week before that, it does allow staff, the community, or the council, if you did want to take a vacation, because if you take a look at some of these other dates, the summertime in local government tends to be an extremely busy time, specifically May and June, because of capital improvement and the budget. And so there's no real time for city staff or council to take a vacation, because every week council and staff either are preparing for a council meeting or you're having a council meeting. So it doesn't really provide a good opportunity to take a vacation. And so we felt that that would be appropriate. So at least the week prior to going back to school, you'd be able to take a break. And then we're also recommending that we not meet on December the 1st. And the reason for that is the week prior to that is Thanksgiving break. And that puts additional pressure on both staff and council to try to go through the material to be prepared for the December the 1st meeting. But the challenge with that is, we all know, hopefully the COVID pandemic will be under control and we'll be able to travel and spend that time with our family. So we just felt that it would be appropriate to not have a meeting. So with that being said, that actually concludes my presentation. And if council is okay with that, we would memorialize this, knowing that we can always add dates. And I'm going to speculate and assume that we're probably going to be requesting a special meeting here and there. But at least as our foundation for our 2021 calendar, so we can begin to plan accordingly, we would recommend this meeting calendar. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the council. Thank you.
Are any of my colleagues wishing to speak on this item? Have any questions? Councilwoman Gallegos?
Thank you, Arnaldo, and staff for looking at those dates and taking into account that the council has to read through it and that staff has to prepare for it. So I appreciate that. And it's always, I feel I'm okay with tacking it on to a housing authority successor meeting, because those aren't always as long if it's needed in the months that we have just that one. So we do have that option.
Yeah, absolutely. Ken, that's an excellent point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members?
Say everything sounds pretty reasonable, but even though we put it on paper and memorialized it, there will be changes. I mean, that just happens. So sounds good though.
Yeah, I just personally want to say that it's an excellent idea, quality of life for staff to be able to accommodate them whenever possible. This is not a heavy lift for us, and I think it's a really good idea myself personally. So seeing no other hands up, I will bring it back to the council for action.
I move that we approve the council calendar presented by manager. Sorry.
With direction.
And was that you, Ms. Gallegos, for the second?
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded by Council Member Montes to approve this items, and seconded by Councilwoman CC Gallegos Foley. Alicia, could you call the roll, please?
District 1?
Yes.
District 2?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 4?
Yes.
District 6?
Yes.
Mayor Garcia?
Yes.
Motion passes with 6 yes and 0 no's.
Thank you very much, Alicia. Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. We'll move on to item E3, discussion on status and action taken on measures to mitigate the impacts of COVID-19, the coronavirus pandemic, by Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I will attempt to keep this brief. Earlier this evening, you heard from Public Health Director Sarah Boss, who provided an update with the vaccines. More specifically to the city of Madera, unfortunately, the past 10 days have been very challenging. We have had a decent number of positive cases. Fortunately for us, we planned early on around in April, where we created alternative schedules to try to mitigate any potential outbreaks. We feel that our efforts were successful, but with that being said, you learn from every positive case or any potential exposure, and we are continuously recalibrating our efforts to try to make sure that our employees are kept safe. City Hall continues to remain closed for 2 reasons. One, due to the COVID pandemic. The second part is our building is going under some HVAC renovation, so we do not have heating in the building. And so we have relocated some employees to other buildings. However, our office staff, what we've attempted to do is any office staff that can telecommute, that's always the first option. There are a couple of us that come into the office. However, we do follow COVID guidelines in terms of wearing a mask in the office. And so again, it has been a challenging 10 days for the organization. So far, those employees, to my knowledge, are doing better. They're faring well, but we are attempting to take every measure that we can for any exposure, trying to make sure that our employees remain safe and ensuring that we're providing adequate PPE. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the mayor and the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. Do we need any action on this item here? Are you asking for, I see you're saying direction. Do you need direction at all?
No, Mayor. It's simply this evening, it's simply an update for the council and the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. We'll move on to item F, council member reports, announcements, and future agenda items. Shall we begin with District 1?
I had something to report, but I don't remember it. And I thought I wrote it down, but I don't know where I wrote it down at.
We can come back to you, Ms. Gallegos.
Thank you.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Garcia. Just want to comment that yesterday, city manager and I had the opportunity to present Supervisor Max Rodriguez a certificate of appreciation for his tenure at the county, and wanted to wish him well in his new his departure and his retirement. So On behalf of the City Council, we presented that on behalf of the City of Madera and the citizens of Madera as well. I also wanted to ask Arnoldo maybe for a future suggested agenda item is, now with this pandemic taking place, we've uncovered a lot of ways of working, and obviously working from home has become one of those things here. I've done it myself in my job, and a lot of the staff that works for us does that as well. So I know that's going to uncover maybe some new ways of working and teleworking from home and what have you. So maybe if data is collected after a certain time of period, is there a cost savings to the city in doing so? Are employees better off working at home? Is there a cost in trying to affix equipment to their homes and what have you? And what have you. So I think with time, and hopefully there's data to show that, or maybe we'll be able to see some figures in the future to be able to see if that might be a possible route for some of the employees that are not really, that have to be there physically, that can do a lot of the work from home. And if that's an efficient way of working, then I think the city at some point or another has to look at that component there. Lastly, I'd like to extend out any assistance or any help to the new council members, Councilwoman Evans and Councilmember Artemio Villegas. If you guys ever need anything from me, obviously I'm available, so you can certainly reach out to me. I'm only a phone call away. You have my number, so give me a call if there's anything that I can assist you with. Last but not least, Mr. City Manager, you had just briefly introduced our new planning. I'm not sure the new planning gentleman, Mr. Adam Cryer. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Wasn't sure if you were going to give him an opportunity also to introduce himself to the rest of the staff and the City Council. So
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the end of my comments there.
Yes, Adam, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
I was going to say, I don't know if someone wanted to go before me. So, hi. I've been working for the city for about 4 weeks now. I am the new assistant planner. I was brought on at the same time as Derek Sylvester, my coworker, who is also working with me, working both directly under Gary. We've very quickly sunk our teeth into a lot of different projects, and I was excited to help present the local early action planning grant today to you guys, just to make sure that we get the funding necessary to keep our planning activity going for the next couple decades. At least on the north side of town there, right? So I appreciate the time that you guys have given us, and I appreciate you approving it so we can move forward.
Thank you, Adam.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, I will end up with this, and I'm sorry I left this for the end. Kind of like Councilwoman Gallegos, I didn't write this down, but because I have the sweater, I want to wish all the staff, all my colleagues, and all council members happy holidays. I hope you guys enjoy them. Be safe, and again, try to keep your families to a smaller amount so that we stop the prevention, or we prevent the spreading of COVID. But with that, happy holidays to all.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Montes?
Oh yeah, welcome aboard, Adam, and everybody stay safe. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and this is our last meeting for the year, right? So see you guys next year.
Alrighty. Councilwoman Anita Evans.
Well, hello and Merry Christmas. Thank you everyone for just welcoming me into the council. Thank you, Arnoldo. Thank you, Alicia, Wendy. They've really been there for me, and I truly appreciate it. And for the council, thank you for just being so supportive of me and for everything that you have offered to me. And to everyone, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and God bless each and every one of you and your family. Stay safe. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. Councilmember Artemio Villegas.
I wish everybody a safe Merry Christmas, and I hope we look forward for the new year, new resolutions, new meetings, and thank you, Arnaldo and Alicia, for helping me to start to understand more and more and more into I'm getting there. So be patient, and I will respond more. The more I know, the more I will try to respond and analyze, and it's going to take a little couple more meetings, but I get in there. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. I had the pleasure of attending the ADA meeting, albeit in the background. I did not attend and really speak to the group, but I really appreciated the dedication of the ADA group to meet and continue to meet during these times of COVID over Zoom. It was very informative. There was a presentation. The part I heard was a part of the Housing Authority gave a presentation. Mr. Casper was there and Martha giving a presentation and letting them know what they provide services for the elderly in our community. And I thought that was very informative. And I want to thank the committee for continuing to meet, even though we face these obstacles with the COVID. I want to remind folks that there are applications available for vacancies in boards and commissions in the city of Madera. And I would encourage anyone who would wish to volunteer and step up to be able to help the city in boards and commissions to please go on their website, fill out an application, and give it to our city clerk. Also remind folks that we were having applications for the vacancy in District 5, the City Council District 5. The applications are out and they'll be out until January. So if anyone's interested in joining our happy group here on Wednesdays with our City Council meetings, by all means fill out the application and perhaps you'll be someone that can be able to join us. We'll welcome you with open arms. I also want to wish happy holidays, particularly to staff. We don't thank you enough for the work that you do. And believe me that we do appreciate the work that you do day to day, day in, day out for the people of Madera. We appreciate you and we wish you safe and happy holidays with your families. This being the last meeting that we're going to have this year. So please be safe, wear a mask, social distance, and if possible, get the flu shot and safe distancing. With that, I'm going, oh, Cece, I'm sorry. We were going to come back to you. Did you remember now?
I did, I wrote it down. I just would like to let the community know and staff know and fellow council members that the Madera Evening Lions and Madera District Fairgrounds put together a hometown Christmas parade last Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and boy, did our community need it. We had 400 tickets every night. We sold out, and we also took extra cars that wanted to come, and it went on for hours. But I saw happy faces. I saw kids singing and dancing and laughing, and because they've been inside for so long, this was something that we really need. So, from the bottom of our hearts, for the city of Madera, thank you, Madera Evening Lions and Madera District Fairgrounds, for doing that for our community. It was awesome. And it took a lot of work, but it was well needed at this time right now. And that's what I had to say. And Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everyone, and enjoy your time with your family. Thank you, Mayor Garcia.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And with that, we will go into our closed session for the remainder of the evening.
Thank you, Mayor. In closed session, the City Council will consider 2 items: conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation under Government Code Section 54956.9 one case, City of Madera versus High Speed Rail Authority, as well as 1 other case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening. we are finished with our closed session. Hilda, would you report?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The council met on the 2 items. With respect to item 1, there was no action taken. With respect to item 2, there was no action taken to initiate litigation. There was action taken 6-0 to proceed with signing on to a letter that MID will be submitting to the Department of Water Resources objecting to New Stone's GSP.
Thank you very much for that, Hilda. I now call adjournment to this meeting. Our next regular meeting will be on January 6th, 2021. Be safe, everybody. Love you guys.
Happy holidays.
Wow.
Happy holidays. Thank you very much.
Adios.
Happy holidays. Good night.
Good night, everybody.